characters, normal cast of characters, Ms. Lily Mockerman and Mr. Edward St. Ange, is a special guest host, Dr. Andrew Gostein. And I'm not even going to begin to try to explain all the details of what we're going to be asking him about, because it is incredible, but the technology is incredible and very useful, and it's very relatable to what we're currently worried about right now in our industry. And for that reason alone, I'm really going to turn it over to Andrew to begin to talk a little bit about why you're here and what we are going to be talking about and what it is that you're doing to try to help some of the COVID-19 issues that the hospitality industry is facing, with what you've already helped the health industry with facing, and other industries as well. So, Andrew, please tell us all the good stuff.
Thanks for having me. So, just a little background about me and my company. So, I'm still a practicing physician, practicing in the ORs as an anesthesiologist, but also as the ICU doctor for Northwestern University Health System, taking care of some of the COVID patients in various parts of the hospital. But I started this company really in 2014 to bring some of these new artificial intelligence technologies safely into healthcare. And I like to think that the thing that really differentiates us from, the Googles or Amazons of the world is that we are very much interested in preserving everyone's privacy. And that's the reason that hospitals welcome my cameras into the hospitals in places where people are very vulnerable. So we, have never and will never do things like facial recognition to try to identify people. We just find it far too invasive. So we took the exact opposite approach, where we make technologies that de-identify people, so that my cameras, in many cases, are incapable of seeing humans. And so we do that stuff to just preserve everyone's privacy. But during COVID, we had the opportunity to roll out some of our thermal cameras to screen people for elevated body temperatures, which is obviously a very, very common symptom associated with COVID. Certainly not the only thing that causes an elevated temperature, but according to the CDC website, anywhere between 83 and 99% of people in the early stages of a COVID infection will have an elevated body temperature. So we've now deployed hundreds of our thermal camera systems across a variety of different industries to make sure that we can help restore some consumer confidence, get people back out there, protect people in the hospitals, to really try to get the economy going again.
So, kind of talking to that, I know it's on point to talk about what you're doing now, but what was the motivation years ago to get into AI technology, and camera technology? What were you originally trying to solve for?
So it all came out of my own frustrations with practicing medicine. I was an analytic chemist with my background in college, and I got to medical school and started practicing in residency and loved thinking, down to the molecular level about what was happening with my patients. And it takes like 5 to 10 minutes extra per patient to think at that level, to really fully understand what's happening to the patients. And I was being inundated with just clerical work that prevented me from doing things like that, like spending 10 minutes figuring out where my patient was in the hospital, which you would think is absurd in the 21st century. So I really developed these passive technologies to help offload a lot of the clerical work I was doing that kept me from focusing on my patients. So setting up computer vision systems and Bluetooth systems and voice recognition systems to help figure out where my patients were and when I was going to be able to see them, or to communicate to the patients or to the nurses what was happening at a 30,000 foot view, so that instead of spending 50 to 70% of my time documenting things in the record or looking for the patients or figuring out which nurse was caring for my patient so I could get an update, I developed a lot of these systems to handle that for me, so that I could focus all of my time just thinking about the patient's medical problems.
It's very interesting.
Wow.
And so where did the thermal camera technology start coming in for you in that journey?
Yeah, so there's a whole host of problems in healthcare, and I hope my conversation with you doesn't cause you to lose any credibility in our health system. But
well, to be fair, I mean, we did have previously someone spend an entire show talking about what biofilm was. So we're at least that
all
far
good. It's
into
all
the
good.
rabbit hole.
I mean, just even on the topic of biofilm, there's now some new wallpapers coming out for healthcare that are actually modeled on shark skin, because we find that actually shark are somewhat resistant to biofilms forming on them. So we could talk about that for the whole rest of the show if you guys want. We'll skip that. But
Shark skin walls. I'd go to a hotel that had shark skin walls.
yeah,
That sounds so badass.
Well, and that way Ben can finally defend why he's still constantly wearing sharkskin suits.
It's the biofilm, Ed.
he's a thought leader. So
Yeah, so sorry about that. So back to where thermal cameras started coming into your journey.
So, it's not uncommon that we have people come to the emergency department and, wait in the emergency department wait room for 4 to 6 hours before they're seen. And when they're in the waiting room, there's nothing monitoring them. And we now have the capabilities with deep learning and computer vision enabled cameras where we can actually read people's heart rates from a camera. We can read people's respiratory rates and how much oxygen is in their blood, and we can read their temperature. So imagine, which is what we did 2 years ago when we were setting up cameras in the emergency department waiting rooms as kind of a research and development project. We had cameras there that could look at all of the people, count how many people, could figure out wait times to see the doctor, and we could start triaging who were the sickest or who were the least sick patients in the wait room. And we could do that by seeing people's heart rates and temperatures. And, for instance, we could say like, hey, the guy in chair 13 has an elevated heart rate. It's 140 beats per minute, and it's very irregular, bouncing all around. And he's got an elevated temperature, and it's very common for sepsis to cause an elevated temperature. And for people that have pre-existing heart conditions, they can also have a condition develop called AFib with rapid ventricular response. So we can make that entire diagnosis with some degree of certainty from a camera and tell the ER doctors, hey, this guy's been waiting in the ER too long. He's starting to get really sick. This could be sepsis. And with sepsis, every hour that you delay antibiotic administration increases your mortality rate by about 7%. So we were trying to set up these systems to passively collect information even before nurses could triage these patients. This guy's really sick. Get the doctor now.
Wow.
That's insane.
It was
That's
just
really
an actual
cool.
extension then into COVID screening. Well, I can't really say COVID screening according to the FDA.
So are you thinking through this, are you thinking potentially once there are quality data sets on some of the other aspects of someone who has COVID, you could potentially start taking in, more information than just their temperature? You could actually look at their blood oxygen, level, things like that.
Yeah, and we're actually doing some even more exciting work with non-contact ECGs, EKGs, as you guys would know them. So, what we've seen with Ebola is we're actually able to pretty accurately detect which rabbits had Ebola when they were inoculated with Ebola, just from an ECG signal. And so, the more data you can take in passively, imagine someone came in, they had a camera looking at them, collecting their respiratory rate, oxygen saturation, temperature, and a non-contact ECG, getting heart rate, and looking for subtle electrical signals in the heart, showing that, there may be some viral myocarditis developing and things like that. If you can pull all of those data sets together, you can actually make a test that is somewhat sensitive and specific for a particular disease. And that's where machine learning technologies are really starting to shine, is the amount of data they can pull in and kind of figure out a signal amongst all of the noise for some specific event is a really good problem for machine learning. And so by taking in a lot of these other technologies and putting it together, we could potentially develop a very rapid and accurate test for COVID, certainly something that's more accurate than our rapid tests now, which are maybe 60 to 70% sensitive at best.
Wow.
Andrew, if I could, just we have a bunch of new faces for you, and I didn't do introductions as of yet. Tristan and Ben are both from the northern part of England, so pardon their language. Dean Schmidt is in Omaha. Adele is in Maine, and Mr. Tim Peter is somewhere in New Jersey, but we never hold that really against him.
Although I'm sure you've got a camera on us right now, and you know exactly where we are and how much money we've got on us.
I could run this video feed through our algorithm and tell you all what your heart rates are, but
That's amazing.
I'm all for that.
Mine certainly jumped up quite a bit there.
Yeah.
I give my
My heart rate
consent.
in New Jersey is actually just normal for people from New Jersey.
It's just up there. And I'm at the same time absolutely amazed at the level of technology and advancement, and also petrified that just how much you can get from so little, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important
Marvelous.
to point out that Tristan, although not really a doctor, has played one on multiple drug commercials. So, I mean, there is some level of respect to be had with that.
Sure.
I think with the current haircut, I'm probably good for going maybe like drug addict. I think that's the
I do
problem.
want to throw in one. I'm going to quote Ed because Ed is far too humble to quote himself. But going back to what Andrew was talking about a moment ago, in terms of Ed's got this great line that I've used repeatedly, including the title of a podcast episode of mine, that is AI makes big data little.
Mhm.
And so obviously that's one of the great advantages that you're talking about, Andrew, about
Yeah.
take machine learning to take machine learning algorithms and interpret the data and things that would be tough for people to do.
So I think a few things to talk about. First, to one of the original points, it is really cool what these technologies can do. There's also a lot of potential risk, collecting information that people don't want collected. And so I think that's where I've tried to establish my company's reputation as the company that first and foremost looks to eliminate that risk. And then if there is useful data left over, then we will use it. But only if we can be sure that we've eliminated the risk for collecting that data first. It does limit some of the things we can do, but even having 80% of the potential for this technology is still a phenomenally large use case that will benefit for humanity. And if I can eliminate all of the risk from it, the risk benefit ratio flips dramatically into the direction of go use this and develop this.
And I
Andrew,
think-
I'm sorry. The very beginning of it, you had mentioned that some company had mentioned you in their dialogue. I thought that might be important in our pre-conversation if you bring that back up.
Yeah, so NVIDIA, invented the GPU. Jensen Huang, their founder, I think in 1999. Anyway, they give an annual keynote, somewhat like Apple, where they, release their new iPhones and things like that every year. And they did an introduction in their keynote this year. It was all about, how people are using NVIDIA GPUs to prevent COVID. And so 49 seconds into that keynote this year, they started highlighting Whiteboard Coordinator, my company, for all of the efforts that we were trying to make to kind of stop the spread of COVID. We have a few other solutions for COVID, even besides just thermal screening.
That's really cool.
But yeah, it's a huge stamp of approval from, a billionaire tech titan to kind of come out and say the name of the company that I thought of when I was in my medical school dorm. It's cool from a personal side to see it. The company have evolved to that point.
Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome.
See,
I think-
sometimes as marketers and technologists, we get a little bit of an ego about ourselves, and sometimes it's very humbling to be reminded just how stupid we are compared to some people.
I mean,
And we're always happy to remind you how
I
stupid.
won't take credit for all the technology. We have some very, very smart people on the team. I'm mostly pioneering the use cases and the privacy, but I have some very smart physicists and PhD mathematicians that are doing all of the math and physics behind the scenes.
I mean, to be fair, so you don't feel like you're not in a good crowd here, there are a couple of people here who have built products that at least one or two people in our industry have listed on their resume as a skill. So, I mean, that's kind of close.
Very cool.
Potato, yeah.
So,
So I'm kind
Almost the same thing, Ed. Almost the same thing.
so bringing this around, how are you starting to productize this for spaces like hotels? What's the vision on that? On how this potentially can be brought into hotels, restaurants, attractions?
So, it all comes back again. Like the need is to restore consumer confidence going back out into the economy. There's horror stories out there of, we did the first double lung transplant in a 20-year-old for COVID last week.
Yeah.
So, even just one story out there like that is enough to really cause a substantial reduction in our GDP and consumerism. So the goal, and I'm not trying to use fear-mongering tactics, but the goal is to make people feel comfortable going back out into our marketplaces and consuming. So with respects to hospitality, I think the hurdle is cost. And so what we're trying to do is very rapidly drive down the cost of this technology, which is a little bit of an investment. But what we would typically recommend doing is trying to deploy this intelligently. So rather than deploying 3 or 4 systems at all of the entrances to, a hotel or something like that, trying to shut down some of the entrances, funnel everyone into one entrance so that we can screen everyone with a single system and not 4 systems. We're working on contracts with people like Disney and Universal Studios to try to screen people at all of the entrances, but also in various lines. We're pushing out algorithms for things like face mask detection on top of the thermal feeds to ensure that people are actually wearing their face masks. So just because people don't have a fever, there's still a small chance that they could have COVID, and the way to reduce the spread is to ensure that they're wearing a mask. So we're trying to use as many of these technologies, and because computer vision scales exponentially at the same level of cost, is how can we put more and more algorithms on this to ensure that people are maintaining proper social distance, face mask wearing, doing thermal screening, and at the same time driving down the hardware cost.
Have you at all laid out the story as part of the positioning of this on recommendations on what to do? Like, so what should you do? So you put these thermal cameras in. Have you taken thought? I mean, because you've taken great care about privacy, but knowing the hotel industry, something the hotel industry takes great care about is making sure that everyone feels welcome, everyone feels treated fairly, and feel hospitality. Have you all started thinking at all about how to tell that story of not just, look, we can scratch the surface of this problem for you, but actually painting how you could approach taking what you learn from this and implementing, how does this turn into safety while not turning into a story of, man walks into a bar and gets, hit with like a animal control collar to pull him out of the bar, right? Because they, so have you all worked on any of that side of it to help bring comfort to adoption on this?
Yeah, and so we have some funny stories where, we've had discussions with people about putting lasers on the cameras, and if people try to come in with fevers, zapping them and stuff like that.
I don't think that's on board with that extension pack completely.
So we've discussed it, and while doable, I think is probably not the route to go. So what we've really kind of settled on is, things that groups like the Equal Opportunity Employer Commission agree with, and that's using this as a first level of screening, right? So this is not super specific, as we would say in medicine, for COVID. Like if someone runs to your facility from 3 blocks away where they parked their car, their temperature is going to be slightly elevated. It's the reason we sweat. So
3 blocks, be a lot higher than slightly in our case.
And Tristan, though, 2 level would be lower, and his breathing would seem like he was having a heart attack. So
there would be no seeming about it. It would actually be.
So I think what we have to use this technology for is just figuring out who needs additional questioning. So when people come in, if they do screen positive for an elevated temperature, asking them additional questions like we do at the hospital. And so typically at the hospital, we see 50 to 25% of the people that screen positive for a fever getting sent home and not going to their shift where they could expose patients or other staff members. They occasionally get sent to the emergency room for treatment because their oxygen levels may be dropping or they may have a bad cough, and they'll actually get sent for testing. The other 50%, are screening negative then because they may have another reason for having a slightly elevated temperature. Maybe they wore 2 winter jackets in on a warmish spring day. There's other reasons. So it's really just having a conversation with them, ideally with some protected medium in between them, to figure out, is this likely COVID, or could this be something else causing a kind of a false positive for COVID?
Have you built any thought process into making sure that this technology cannot somehow be used under subpoena or anything like that? Is there any like data destroying aspect of this process so that hotels don't have to worry that they may get subpoenaed for data from this type of surveillance?
So we don't store any data. So for some of our other hospital-based products where we're trying to optimize the hospitals at large, we do have to save data for that. This is just real-time streaming information. As soon as you walk out of my camera's view, you no longer exist to it. So there's no way we would ever enable that. It's not a feature we can toggle on and off. If you asked us to save it for you, we would say talk to someone else. It's not a feature that we will ever enable because there's risk to it. And like I said, the first thing I want to do is eliminate all risk. Is there anything left over in that data that we can use to try to improve some situation?
So how does that work then in terms of the staff being aware of who that guest was? If that data leaves that quickly, then how is the staff alerted that this particular person may have an elevated temperature or whatnot?
So what we typically have doing, again, is having this video feed on and someone watching it on a screen as people are coming in. So what we don't want is someone screening positive for a fever and then 30 minutes later, someone reaching out to them after they've walked around the whole facility, potentially spreading COVID. So this is really a tool to identify people right at the point of entry and reach out to them immediately after entering your facility so that they don't have the ability to spread the virus for 3 hours before you reach out to them. So it's a tool that in real time you would monitor as someone comes in, get their temperature, ask them, have you been exposed? Any other symptoms like loss of taste or loss of smell, cough, shortness of breath, anything like that in the last, 72 hours. And then determining, is this person safe to let in, or is this someone you should actually send to the emergency department or an urgent care center?
Gotcha.
So we'll keep track of some. It will keep track of some historical data, though, that would allow you to say that, oh, there was a spike on Thursday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then look back to figure out what was the underlying cause to that. Was something going on that might have contributed to that?
So we do keep aggregate, completely anonymized temperature readings just to ensure the accuracy of the system over time. So essentially what that looks like is we keep a histogram plot of, how many people had 97.1, how many people had 97.2. And we like to see a normal bell curve distribution around 96 to make sure that we're giving accurate readings. If for some reason there was drift in that, everyone started averaging 102, which has never happened, but if it did, we would know that maybe there was some error in our measurements. So we do have a system for doing quality assessment to make sure that this system always stays very accurate. But it would have no way of telling you who the people were, even what day they came in. It's just an aggregate of what the population looks like in front of that camera.
The screen share work, right?
Trends.
Yeah, we saw it. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's nice because the system is truly passive. There are other systems out there where you have to walk in and you have to stand in front of a tablet or something for 30 seconds. And if you don't line up your face perfectly, it'll give you an inaccurate measurement. And if someone opens the door and that famous 100% humidity air from Chicago wafts in, that's going to affect your measurement because the humidity will refract infrared waves away from the sensor. So, we've taken all of these other factors into account to make sure all you have to do is walk in front of my camera at a normal pace and we'll read your temperature.
So Andrew, as Lily was saying, how would it work in a hotel if you caught somebody with a high temperature and you had and you asked them questions? if they don't feel like going to the hospital or anything, wouldn't we have to make note that this person was coming in and do something to kind of protect them, protect other people from them? Or are we really not expected to, write down anywhere, that we had a high alert for this person? Is it really, up to them?
Yeah, so I
I'm
think,
wondering how it would actually play out within the hotel.
so I think that's, to some degree, a question for the individual business owners. And the kind of sad truth is that we're entering a new economy now, right? So the whole world is going to change. How we go back to work, how we consume, how we go to the grocery store is different. We can't, in my opinion, just go back to business as normal unless we want to accept potentially a higher mortality rate than is needed. I don't think there's a future in the next year or two where we totally eliminate coronavirus based on what we've seen for, how long immunity lasts after you've recovered from this infection, how quickly people will accept a vaccine. We're seeing maybe 60% of people would get the vaccine if one was available. So to try to get to those herd immunity thresholds is going to be very difficult. So, if someone does come in and they, say, yeah, I do feel sick, but I still want to come in, I think it's going to be up to the individual business owner if they want to take that risk. If they are truly letting someone in that has COVID and staying in their hotel or going to the grocery store, and then an outbreak gets traced back to them, that's certainly detrimental. But it's not 100% accurate to say that I am going to detect every single person that has COVID with perfect certainty. So it is kind of a judgment call. And I think it's up to the end user to really determine what they want their process to be. But I don't think we're heading towards a future, certainly in the short term, where we can just kind of turn a blind eye to thinking about problems like that.
Do you think
it's interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, Adele, you got in. You got to do it.
So I know at one point you said it's not specific to COVID. It's looking for the symptoms, and but is it or can it be a test for COVID, or at that point you would apply a test for COVID or ask somebody to get a test for COVID somewhere? But probably we could do that in the property, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, so certainly if, and we're seeing the administration increase the amount of tests that are available, which is totally the way to go. So I think if a facility has that capability, and they do screen positive, remember this is a screening test, not a diagnostic test. So a screening test just helps you figure out who you should test, rather than testing every single person that comes in and hemorrhaging a lot of money on these tests, is taking a subset of the people that are at super high risk for being positive and testing those people to confirm COVID. So if that is a capability of the place of business, then that is absolutely an appropriate route to go. But this is not the end all be all of diagnostic tests. This just kind of from the economic perspective helps you allocate your limited testing capabilities to people that are at elevated risk of being positive.
So perhaps then at a boutique hotel, when they wouldn't have as many people, maybe testing individually is not as big an expense. But as the size of the property or the attraction goes higher, having that in place may be a cost savings instead of an expense.
Yeah, and I think, all of those tests are going to take some amount of time to come back. But if someone's walking in, and is on thermal imaging to say, no fever, very low risk, don't make them wait in the lobby for half an hour while you're running their sample, right? So that's certainly one route. But for people that are doing, like a nail salon that might do a dozen, clients a day, this is not the technology for that situation.
Really interesting.
So Dr. Gostin, I'm curious, you had said that you could essentially read our heart rates now on this feed. So is it safe to say that if this were in an app form, that it could read all of these metrics through the phone's camera?
So you need a special camera to read people's temperatures. It's a more expensive camera. It has a special sensor in it that can look at what's called long wave infrared. The normal infrared that you see in like night vision cameras is actually short wave, and that is not the same information that's communicated to the camera in terms of temperatures. So you can get respiratory rate, heart rate, to some degree oxygen saturation from normal cameras, but you cannot get temperature.
That's
So
amazing.
there are actually, I believe, other apps for iPhones that you can read your heart rate just by looking at the camera.
That's
That's
incredible.
amazing.
I mean, one of the things this lends itself to is a Chrome plugin or a plugin for Zoom. And if you're pitching to a prospect, what causes his pupils or her pupils to dilate? What causes his temperature to raise? What causes his heart rate to go up?
Oh, Ben.
I'm just thinking about the applications. This
Don't
guy.
use the force of evil.
You're
Ben,
a cash reader there, Ben, aren't you? How much?
Ben-
I'm going to put a piece of paper over my camera.
yeah, Ben is thinking about how to take this architecture and turn it into a Salesforce plugin, so it'll actually really correctly rank the lead's temperature.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Andrew, I'm sorry, I guess we have another doctor on today to talk evil. May I introduce you to Ben?
I'm going to call it, Ed. It was you who said to me, always start out and work
Yes.
on how a technology could be used for evil.
and then work backwards. You're absolutely right. I mean, that is the best way.
That is actually Ed's business plan.
Business model.
It's not working backwards.
So, Andrew, you mentioned earlier, and you already have it in hospitals and you have it in large-scale offices as well. And you've alluded to the fact it's not exactly unaffordable or cheap at this point or affordable at this point. It's still getting to scale as to you being able to bring down the price. But some of the hospitals you mentioned have like hundreds of these cameras, not just one here, one there. But like, can you talk a little bit more about what you've already got into the market, what you have, and what you think is eventually going to be the price points, or what you think will be the necessity for hospitality to have how many in certain circumstances?
Yeah. So I mean, my long-term vision is to drop hardware costs closer to $2,000 per system, and then essentially a monthly software licensing fee per camera. And to get that somewhere around between $10 and $20 a day for running the system.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, this could be an interesting solution for the hotels that are kind of the most screwed by global pandemic, which are the big box convention hotels. I mean, because this is a way to be able to have a convention where you could get closer to capacity because you're helping cut risk by mass screening and then digging into a targeted screening on ones that hit above a certain threshold. And when you talk about those types of costs for I'm thinking like the Hyatt on International Drive,
Right.
a couple $1,000s for a system and $10 a day per camera.
They can afford
Versus the revenue opportunity of actually being able to host and you could actually win group business by
That's right.
having this.
it. Exactly. Becomes an RFP item.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's really that when you were saying it was less than affordable, I mean, I got to be honest with you, I was thinking much more expensive.
Right now it is. So right now the camera systems are costing us about $10,000 to deploy.
Per camera or for the whole system?
Per camera system. So if you have 2 entrances, 2 camera systems, $20,000.
Okay.
The monthly cost is still right around there. So it really just depends how many entrances, and that's why we try to funnel people instead of 4 entrances to 2 entrances or something like that.
But I still
Even
got to say, you have a conference center, a big conference center, and you can say that you can thermoscan everybody in and out of that going through the gateway as a part of the condition. To Valen's point, by the way, Valen, I'm sorry, me, Dr. Gustine, sorry. I never did get it right. Yeah. All right. So anyway, just the idea of being able to say that as a part of the safety measures that you're and protocols you're putting into place, that is a huge RFP value for people to think.
Well, and you can charge extra for it. You're a hotel that has it. There's a base fee. I mean, I still think even at the 10,000 per system, when you think about a hotel like the Hyatt, like the Gaylord, the Marriott World Center, and when you think about how much revenue a group brings to that hotel, especially if they can pass on some of that cost. I mean, you're talking 10 groups. If you passed on $1,000 a group, which would be absorbed easily into a group of the scale we're talking about.
And what about Vegas, right?
Right. Casinos? My gosh.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are casinos adopting this technology. We're certainly not the only people doing thermal. Like I said, there's other people. But yeah, we've seen a lot of adoptions there. We've seen adoption in airports and things like that.
I wonder if, to Ben's point, casinos will start to adopt the heart rate monitoring to understand if people are cheating.
By the way,
they haven't already.
I would imagine that already exists.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And if it did exist, Ed, who better to cheat the system than a doctor?
Ed would know if that's.
So, have you, Andrew? Have you considered?
Let Andrew go, by the way, guys.
Have you considered?
Andrew's got to run. So
have you considered other industry sectors as well? Because I know we're talking about big boxes and conference centres, but sporting events right now would be. I know the Premiership football in the UK. You would make what would be described as a metric ton of money. I missed the word there.
So everyone wants to be wealthy. I'm not actually very worried about that at that moment, but that's not the reason I'm doing this, right? I just had my second daughter 2 months ago. I'm like,
Congrats.
She's born in the midst of this global pandemic. It's like the economy goes to shit. The whole world's falling apart. It's like, I refuse to accept that future as the future that I'm raising my daughters in. So it really is more about bringing the economy back online. We are giving the hardware away at cost. There's no upcharge on it. So I'm slightly less concerned about becoming fabulously wealthy and more concerned about my daughters.
That's fantastic, because the reason why I was asking is that I want to go to a football match again. So I was, just appealing.
So I think this is going to be your UK conduit.
So Andrew, if I want to get in contact with you to introduce you to my local college football program, how would I do that?
You can go to our website that I just posted in our chat here, www.wb, as in whiteboard, coordinator.com. You can find all the information about the different products we have, but most notably the thermal screening solution. You can reach out to us there if you're interested in, evaluating the solution for your place of business.
Andrew, again, thank you for your time.
Amazing.
And Andrew, I will tell you on behalf of everyone here, if there's anything any of us can do to help you come into the hospitality space, navigate it. We've all been in it a long time. All of us, with the exception of Tristan, are somewhat respected.
Until we started this show.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for having me on. I do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Man, I'll tell you what.
I feel so dumb right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And I feel even dumber than the Lottie after what I just said.
That was amazing, because I got to be honest with you, I didn't know when friends of mine, Vic Rose, who was in the peanut gallery today, brought this to my attention. It's like, hey, look, I got a friend. He's in the medical side of things. He's a doctor, and he's doing this for the hospitals. And he's trying to consider the idea of how this could work into hospitality. And I'm sitting there going, Vic, we're a marketing conversation. I mean, I don't know, kind of thing. But then as I started listening more about what he was doing and how it was getting done, I'm like, you know what? What the heck? This is here and now stuff. This is what we're facing. This is how we're going to get back to business and stuff. So I'm like, sure. I says, just know that it's not a sales pitch thing. And he's like, no. I mean, just, and again, thank you for all the questions, Ed and everybody else, because, I wanted to see what this was all about as well. And it really was fascinating to hear that kind of.
What I'm a bit concerned about that I just noticed is, it's saying that I'm in the Villages right now. And I would like to point out, I am not in the Villages.
Ed, you
Far
got
higher.
it.
Is it what, like a retirement village? Or?
Yeah, yeah.
retirement
The
village.
Villages is the largest retirement community in like the southeast. I am not there
Ed's
right
just
now.
given up on life. He's
I'm
retired.
done. Yeah, like
Out to pasture. Out to pasture.
that's disturbing. I'm gonna have to figure out why that's that.
You know what, Ed?
I
mine
think
changes
though,
from week to week.
from a marketing standpoint, I think if you are, because my biggest concern has not been for leisure type hotels in nature destinations. My concern has been the 4 big box hotels on the same street in Atlanta.
Right.
How do you open those back up? And the risk of this is those are generally owned by the type of people who are running the math right now on what do I convert this to, so I don't have to live the next 2 years and having this asset suck me dry.
Well, I just posted in the comments the Omni Berkshire Place in New York City just
Right.
announced it is closing permanently.
Right.
Well, 15% of all Midtown New York hotels are not reopening. They're rescaling to something different.
Right. And so
we're-
that's the
that's
fear.
A lot of markets where there's big box, and I agree with you completely.
And this, if you are working for any of those organizations, you need to go chase down this technology, because first of all, you want to talk about how to take an asset class that's likely to struggle for the next 2 years and immediately move your asset into the top, because you can sell to groups that you have this technology, and this technology is going to make it possible for them to meet.
And it would be in the best interest of New York City and Vegas and Atlanta and Nashville and
Orlando, Chicago.
Orlando, Chicago.
Yeah.
LA,
I mean, like,
to-
However,
to
Wait.
help-
however,
right,
Oh, good.
I
to help us
see.
get this done, right?
Right. So we just went through, before COVID, this huge wave of data privacy. And while this doesn't store information, I imagine that there's a strong percentage of the population that will see this as a personal invasion of their privacy and will boycott any hotel that installs it.
But I
Hopefully
think
that's
if,
offset by people who
but
enjoy it.
see, Lily, I mean, the way I would picture handling that is this is not something that's active. This is something that's in specific areas that are bottleneck points for people who are attending something, and we're told you're allowed to attend this because of this technology.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to continue hurting.
And
And
I,
I
think
think you
that's
get
totally
past that
fine.
completely.
Like for
Yeah.
for places where you're installing it for a group,
Mhm.
right? And not for every guest that's coming to your hotel, but only for, hey, here's your invite to the group. Heads up, we're going to be doing this and this and that, and you either come or you don't.
Well, and I
And
don't even do it as
honestly-
heads up. I do it as your safety is at a higher level
Right.
because we're doing this.
Right.
Because it's in anything, it's how you position it, right?
Yeah.
And
That being said, if there's one thing that has been incredibly obvious throughout all of this, it's that you will not sway some people
Yep.
on the topic of privacy. And I do think as we go through this, we are seeing more and more like protect me instead of protect my privacy, because one of my favorite quotes is you cannot have 100% security and 100% privacy.
That's
There's a
correct.
trade-off
Well,
between
hang on
the
a
two.
second. On this one, we're talking about possibly slightly different things here around privacy, because I think we're potentially looking at this from a marketing point of view and all of the data protection, privacy, and again, there's a whole other myriad of things that go on there. If I was to tell you right now, one of you on this call was ill, and I had something that for free, because you walked in somewhere, would tell you and potentially catch it early
and save your life.
and save your life, I think there'd be a lot less people whinging about.
But again,
Right.
it's
So
all
let's-
in the way you position it. Like if you create areas and those areas are full of signage, and the signage says, do not enter this area unless you are, by entering this area, you're agreeing that you're being scanned, and, this is going to happen, and even if you want to mark out on the floor, where that area starts to allow people to have a choice, because privacy and the thresholds of where someone's feeling about privacy move is a personal choice that's situational.
Right.
So, you are on a trip where you're about to be in a room with 10,000 people. I don't care. You could be the most privacy centric person in the world, but you want to go to this group. You're going to go walk through that pathway and you're not going to have a problem with it.
I totally agree.
Hold on. Adele, welcome to the normal show. You got to have some sharp elbows. I know you've been trying to get a word in. Please, Adele, but just run right over it, or me, or anybody. Go ahead.
I'm off the cuff. I'm really not even thinking about the hotel first. I want to introduce Dr. Gustine to Charlotte St. Martin from the Broadway. I mean, my wagon is hit to their success. I want to introduce them to, Exhibition Place in Toronto, where where they welcome millions of people every year. And I want, and Javits and all these other places, Madison Square Garden. Those are, the people I'd like to introduce to Dr. Gustine.
And the Transportation Safety Administration, right? An airplane.
Which, who, by the way, already have cameras all over you.
Of course.
And that's a good point, because it's not just TSA that has cameras everywhere, but we talk about privacy. This isn't that far beyond what we're already doing, right? You go to Vegas, walk into a casino in Vegas, there's not a spot in that casino that you're not on camera somewhere.
Right.
All this is doing to it is taking a scan of your temperature. I don't know if that is that much more of an invasion of privacy than already looking at you.
The coolest thing you could do with this, I just had a brilliant idea, is you can set up kiosks with this technology that has a Bluetooth token capability to put a certificate on your phone that you can show to businesses the last time you passed scan, to where it wouldn't have to be everywhere.
Right.
It would be check-in points.
Right.
Holy smokes.
Instead of having to show something, they can read it, right? So they could just read some kind of signal from your phone where you don't even have to show them anything.
I just say, with your idea, Ed, if you'd have brought that up pre-COVID-19.
Oh, yeah, no, like...
Right.
That 84 level.
That's the beauty of new realities.
The part that I didn't ask Andrew when he was here was, he's not there's so many moving pieces. The other moving piece of this is this trackability issue that is going to slowly get into our society as to where was I last compared to who was I in contact with, and the people that adopt that and share that. And to your point, Ed, if there's a methodology that says I can get certified with a durability of X amount of time before I have to get recertified again because of whatever, and you just walk and talk and go through those processes. But again, to your matrix point, it's all about the power of choice. It's the ability to choose.
Well,
that being said, I still think we're going to see cases in the Supreme Court within a year that because this is going to, we have no laws for this, none. So 5, because it'll take a while. But still, we're going to see these lawsuits start to pop up, I think, and it's going to reshape the way that we look at privacy when it comes to some of these things, because I'm on board and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, right? I think this is great technology. I would like to see it implemented. And I also know that there's probably a good 15 to 20% of the population who will make a huge deal of this. And if the news cycle over the past few months has taught us anything, it's that they're going to pick up on that 15% and not the 85% that are.
Of course, but you can also use that as an opportunity to be the model of how you could deploy this in a way that respects privacy. Like I was even thinking with some of his answers on, we won't do it, but we'll allow you to do it. If you're thinking of installing this type of technology, it should be in a way that is portless, meaning there's no USB ports to the server that's hosting the technology. There's no connectivity to it beyond video feed, and that even those, you attempt to make those very resilient to hacking. Because if you, between signage, between focused points that have alternative routes, meaning you can choose to do the thing you're here to do, but in order to do other things, you have to go through this point, you could become the model of how to do this correct and on the right side of right. And see where the Supreme Court stuff and the law stuff comes in is there are so many people who will do this in a way that they'll take advantage and make other uses of it that are gray area. And some of them will be right and it'll work and they'll be fine. And then some of it won't. And you can even see that like in the world we live in. You look at companies like Hyper, who Hyper was globally mapping and geo-fencing hotels to build these public profiles. There was a way you could have done that well, that stayed on the right side of history. They chose not to do that, and they ended up on the wrong side of history. And so that comes with anything, any technology or any new. Sorry, go ahead.
1 second. No, if I can jump in for 1 second. You're both right, right? Lily's saying there's a percentage of folks who are not going to like this.
Yep.
Here's the thing. You're going to get sued for one of three reasons. You're either going to get sued because you have this. You're either going to get sued because people get sick because you don't have this.
Yep.
Right. And you're going to get sued by the people who, said you should have had something and didn't do anything at all.
Right.
The reality is we've got a situation that is going to be existent, that's a word, will exist for some period of time until and unless we get vaccines.
But
right? That this is something we have to talk about. What is the reality? And I just one last thing, and then I'll shut up. Is that you look at the TSA, right? TSA came around because it was a response to a situation, and now people do all kinds of things that would have been unthinkable in the world on September 10th, 2001, right? So the fact of the matter is, we either do something to try to address this, or we accept the reality that people are going to get sick, or we accept the reality that there are some businesses that will never be able to reopen because the customers will say, I have no interest in going there.
And I think the one thing that I can see that would most definitely profit from this type of technology is, you said it there, both Lily and Tim. You said, sue for this, sue for that, sue for the other. If you could put those people in an audience group and get a solicitor to be able to target people who have just been pulled aside, my goodness, how much would they pay for that? But I can see how you could twist this incredibly useful technology for the darker good. And I'm sorry to say, it's both Ben and I that have been bringing up the Dr. Evil side here. It's not just a British thing.
It totally is. Every villain.
The villains are always British.
All the bad guys.
I already know that. I know what Ben's going to do with this. He's going to go over and find certain people that he's loves deeply, and make sure that every time they walk into some place, their temperature is always elevated, so they're always being frisked.
This is a bizarre tangent, but do you know why the villains are always British?
We're better actors.
We sound better.
It's Star Wars. Star Wars was filmed in England, and they got tax benefits of a certain percentage of the actors were from Britain. And the reality was that they'd already cast many of the lead roles using American actors, and so they used British actors to be, the villains. That's where it all started.
So the British tax law, again, is a reason that the Brits are kind of portrayed poorly.
But to be fair, it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far,
far away.
So I'm curious to kind of follow through. You've got this system in place, right? And I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts on what happens when the guest comes through with 102-degree temperature. What happens next? Do you pull them out? I hear that there's a former United Airlines attendant who can do training on how to drag people out of your hotel. But short of that, what else would the hotel do in response to this?
Idea. Because I think we're in such uncharted territories,
Right.
I think you have to get local ordinances or something along those lines that provide some sort of protection to the business. But in the absence of that, I have no idea how you.
And this is, I agree with
Ashley. Somebody actually got shot for.
Yeah.
Trying to get somebody to wear a mask in a retail store, and that's not even at the same level as what we're talking about here, and the potential for privacy violation or whatnot. So
I agree with Tim. I think you actually lobby your local politicians to come out with government guidelines for that area on, once someone has been identified, how should a business treat that. Because that then you're moving the liability of that from you as a business, you as a brand, to you can point to and say, my local ordinance is this. We're following the rules. These are the rules.
Richard in the chat over here, relatively long, I'm sure, but just synopsis, basically saying he lives in North Fort Lauderdale, And he's referring to the fact that most restaurants, a third of them at least, make absolutely no mention of what they're doing about COVID, whether you need to wear a mask, not wear a mask, what their protocols, or whatever have you. And that is a bit of an issue, this ostrich in the head in the sand kind of mentality on some businesses that they're, I even know of some large organizations that are not even referring to it as COVID anymore, just as safety precautions. They're trying to get the stigma of it, of the fatigue of it, I guess, maybe. And that's, that makes sense. There is a fatigue issue associated with this constant reference to it. But people need to know what they're expecting when they come into your business. They need to know whether you're mandating masks, not mandating masks, whether you're following, proper guidelines based on municipalities or whatever, CDC or whatever. That there needs to be a better communication from us as well as to what the expectation is.
Agreed.
Did you hear how strongly Dr. Gustine said it was important to wear masks? I mean, there's a lot of lightening up that's been going on, and you see the spike that's been happening, and something has to be done to make clear to people that it's.
And you're right at that point, Adele, with what Richard was saying there, that you've got a third of retail and restaurant websites not actually displaying whether you should or shouldn't wear a mask. I wonder how many people have gone to research that, realize they don't know what the rules are, and that there could be people not wearing masks and don't go there.
Right.
So, it can swing both ways with that information by, not wanting to mention it means that there's people, I don't mind, I'm going to go there any case. But there is a big subsection of society that are actively looking for safe ways to go and do this. So
Kristen, I was speaking to a friend of mine who lives in Florida. She said that she has a friend that is, has immunity issues. So she was very protective of herself. And she only goes to businesses that say you must wear a mask. Exactly. So there was a bold sign saying you must wear a mask. It said on the website you must wear a mask. You walk in the door, and there are the two people behind the counter, neither of whom are wearing masks. And she said, I came here because you said you're going to wear a mask. And they said, oh, lady, you do you, and we'll do us, And that is just not okay. And that was me adding the drama. I wasn't there. I was.
You did very well with it, though.
But that's not okay.
Okay,
you have the thing is that the owner believed in their heart that that was the thing to do, but they weren't in the room, and you have to make sure that your employees are feeling, whatever it is that you're putting in place. A lot of times, the owners say, this is who we are, and the staff doesn't know that that's who we are.
That's just going to backfire in a big way, like you say, because now you've got one message that you've done, that friend of yours has passed it on to you, and you will then pass it on. So the negative, everyone knows this in marketing, that one negative review gets passed on with it 5-7 times. Whereas, the positive review you've got where if your friend had walked in there and they were wearing the mask, that story would never have got to you.
Exactly.
It's just
it has to be very consistently enforced across the board, because if I'm a traveler and I just left Seattle and flew to Orlando, and somehow I passed all of my screenings along the way, and I get to that hotel in Orlando, and now they say, no, you can't come in. What am I supposed to do? Do I get back on a plane and go back to Seattle? Well, no, they're probably not going to let me, right? Do I go to another hotel? Well, theoretically, that hotel shouldn't let me either. So what is the answer to that question? I don't think there is one.
And Dean, do you have an ethical responsibility if there's a likelihood that you are infected to isolate? Should you try and go to another hotel? I mean, what can you do? Hole up in a motel for 14 days and try not to touch anyone? I don't know.
Maybe that's the start of the new hotel, the isolation hotel.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the hotel I have in Vancouver is one of my clients. A big portion of our 87% perpetual occupancy through all this was the mandate of 14-day forced quarantine. Because they were all suites and with kitchenettes and so forth, and we could provide grocery service, breakfast service, and dinner deliveries and everything else. So that was a huge little niche aspect of this current market demand that we were able to tap into.
There was research that I saw, and I think it's worth putting it out there. And I'm not, me, I don't like to bring up anything political This is not intended in any way to be political. This is intended to be a statement of where people are in different markets. There was research from the conference board that talked about people's point of view on how secure they feel, how safe they feel, etc. And it varied widely by region of the US. This was only done in the US, so for our friends overseas, my apologies, I don't have that data. But it is clear that there are people in some parts of the country who are much more concerned about this. There are people who, in other parts of the country who are much less concerned about this. And the reality is people will either get sick and they won't, and that will ultimately be what decides how quickly we get to a place where everybody can feel comfortable, right? The data doesn't care how people feel. The data, the virus doesn't care how people feel. People will get sick and that will change behaviors, or people won't get sick and that will change behaviors. Mm-hmm. But until the virus itself is dealt with, we're always going to have to deal with how people feel about it on top of that.
True. Well, I know that just even now, and this goes back to a conversation we've had a few shows back, and I think Lily, you brought this up in different ways as well. I've done videos that are just introductory videos for the person at the hotel to walk through to show the changes at the hotel, so that people traveling, I mean, a lot of the core conversations they have with hotels right now is your pool open? Is your restaurant open? What's open around you? Do you guys wear masks, or do you have screens? Whatever it is, what's the protocol changes? And so just even sharing that visually, and whether it be on social media or wherever mediums you want to use, gives them a feeling of understanding what their expectations are when they arrive. The other edge of the sword of that is that we have the big social media monster. And there's vigilantes out there that are waving the phones around going, look, Hilton says that they're supposed to be wearing masks and they're not wearing masks, and Marriott says this, or IHG, whatever. And because the hotel isn't following what the brand is saying, or what they're touting as following CDC guidelines. So you have to make sure that you practice what you preach, or at least make sure people are aware of what it is that you are doing, so that they don't have any false expectations.
Adele referenced kind of the spike in COVID cases too, and that's a topic that I kind of wanted to air today as well. I don't think it was on our list, but reopened markets are seeing spikes in cases, which I think none of us are surprised by, especially given the protest activity, which is large groups of people, even in markets that haven't necessarily reopened. And so, anytime that whether it's a protest, whether it's a group, it doesn't matter. It's a group of people that are close together, sharing common space, and likely to spread anything that's going on. However, has anybody seen normalized data? Because number one, we have more ability to test right now. We're doing more testing. So is the percentage of positive tests going up? Because all I see seems to be the number of confirmed cases is going up. Well, that's great. But if the number of tests is going up, so is the number of confirmed cases. And additionally, statistically, if one person had it, you're not going to have more than maybe 10 new cases in a day. If 500,000 people have it, then you could have 5 million new cases in a day. So is there any normalized data?
The data that seems to be the one that's, and I'm not an expert on this by any stretch, on the illness side, but the one that seems to make sense logically to me, that I've heard people who seem to, epidemiologists talking about and the like, is that the number of hospitalizations are going up in many markets, right? And that's the really concerning thing, because those aren't being driven by positive tests. Those are being driven by people who have to go to the hospital. Right? They're sick enough that they have to go. And that's the troubling bit, is that
and again, that's
data is climbing. That's more concerning, right?
I mean, it's like the magic penny, if you're familiar with that. If you have a penny that doubles every day, you're going to have $5 million by the end of the month. Same thing with the coronavirus cases. And I'm not saying that it's not problematic, but being a data person myself, it does concern me that I feel like the data we're being provided is very misleading, and not actually, a lot of people are making conclusions based on a number of cases, which actually is not valid data for some of the conclusions that are being made by it. So I worry for the hotel industry, right? Like, oh, there's a spike because the market has reopened. Is it really because the market has reopened? Is it because there's more testing and this is a natural spread? Because I would hate to see markets and hotels shut down a second time based on a number of confirmed cases that we should actually be expecting within a certain amount of reason.
Well, I think that the challenge with a negative result for a COVID-19 test is that it's temporal, right? So I can be negative today, but I could be positive tomorrow. And so with the positive results, you have it. You suppose you'll generate the antibodies. You probably, although there have been isolated cases where there's some documentation that you could get it more than once, but we don't know enough to make any assumptions. But the thing about positive or negative cases is it's not a very useful data point because the data could, I mean, as soon as when you're negative, you're negative. When you're positive, or when you're positive, you're positive.
Right.
You're negative.
You're negative at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really challenging data point to even consider.
But it is because it shows you, as our Governor Cuomo says, a snapshot of that day. So if you see on Sunday that 2% of the people being tested have COVID, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people done again on Monday, and in those now it's 1%, now it's 0.9%. The next day, thousands and thousands and thousands of people of that day, and only 0.8% have it. It is showing you, a snapshot of where we are as a public, because they're doing tens of thousands every day. So it's huge.
It's still temporal though, but I would ask the question for all of us, right? Totally not a valid sample, but how many of you, and you don't have to tell the results, but I haven't gotten tested because I haven't shown any symptoms, and I haven't been in enough places to put myself at what I believe is an understandable risk. So, and I don't right now, I am not interested in getting myself tested because I don't believe I'm sick and I don't believe I'm a risk. So I imagine, I'm not going to make any assumptions about the rest of you, but a lot of my people in my social group and professional group feel the same way, which has an impact on testing, right? So, which again has an impact on, you only get tested if you are an essential worker, or you're worried about your health, or you're being forced to for a job or something, right?
Or you're displaying symptoms.
Sorry?
Or you're displaying symptoms.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Valen, but I would say that the same law applies when you're counting the total number of cases.
I see. That's why I come at it, Lily, from the hospitalization perspective. They do not hospitalize you if you don't exhibit severe symptoms, right? The reality is you only get hospitalized if you pass a certain threshold. And in markets where they have reopened earlier, California, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, and I'm forgetting like two others, the rate of hospitalizations, the 7-day rolling average of hospitalizations, is higher now than it has been at any other time during the situation. That's troubling, right? That suggests we are seeing that whether it's the incidence of the virus or the severity of the virus is sort of irrelevant. The reality is the virus is taking a bigger toll in those areas, and that's very troubling.
Yeah, the hospitalization score seems to be the standard that is the measurability, regardless of the testing scale, regardless of the infection scale, regardless of those who do get tested, don't get tested. It's who's going out and showing up at the hospital saying, I'm sick.
And it's sick enough for the hospital to say, we're going to bring you in and your insurance company is going to cover it. Right? I mean, the reality is, if you don't feel so good, you go there and you got a sniffle and a fever, they're going to send you home. If you go there and you can't breathe, or you're a candidate for a lung transplant, that's a much bigger issue, right?
Yeah.
I think really my overall point, because I do tend to agree, I think that the cases are going to spike. I think it's probably a problem, but we can't truly measure how large of a problem it is with the way that data is being portrayed right now. And to Valen's point, like there's no such thing as perfect data when it comes to this, because the only way to get perfect data is to test everyone in the US daily for coronavirus daily. And it's never going to happen.
Right.
So I think that my point is, though, that there are ways that we could more accurately represent the data so we have a better handle on things. Because if you go back, and this is probably such a hot topic for me because I see it happen in the revenue management world all the time, where people tell stories based on bad data, make strategic decisions based on bad data. You've got a luxury hotel with a Hampton Inn and a Courtyard in their comp set, and you're looking at your star index and wondering why it doesn't, why whatever you're doing isn't in fact impacting your star index. So I think just across the board, it's sort of a cautionary tale that you need to make sure that your data is always as accurate as you can in order to make smart decisions.
One of my all-time favorite quotes is, "All models are wrong. Some are useful." Right. And when we look at these things, I'm looking for what is the useful data, right? What is, and I will tell you, I have conflicting data. I have absolutely conflicting data, and I want to say what I'm about to say very carefully because I might sound like the most heartless individual in the world. So I want to be very careful about that.
No.
Only because it's British accent.
Yeah, I don't think.
Okay, well, so on the one hand, we are seeing cases, hospitalizations in some of the states I just mentioned are spiking, are hitting new highs. At the same time, I work with properties that are in those same markets, and demand is also going up, right? I'm working with my clients to say, okay, what we want to do is make sure we're doing everything we can to keep guests safe, and we also want to make sure we're getting at minimum our fair share of what demand exists, right? We have a responsibility to make sure we have a duty of care to make sure we're treating our guests, in a way that they will be safe. And if guests want to come and we can afford to open the doors, we should also do that, right? So is that sustainable if the hospitalizations continue to rise and people start to get scared and say, I don't want to travel? That may be a reality. All the more reason we want to get our fair share or better now while demand exists, because if demand falls off again, that's going to be a problem.
Okay, so I wanted to bring note that the perfect storm, and we do have Mr. Myrtle Beach with us, so we're going to be able to talk about and it sits on top of the mountain. But there are two other mitigating circumstances that are just as powerful as negatives in our industry right now, as is the fear of the COVID, because there is the demand we know is there for whatever person type is wanting to travel. The demand is there, as Mr. Stewart is going to allude to, as to his successful campaigning structure. But the other aspects of it is that some hotels cannot staff themselves back. There is I'm doing enough right now, and to what you mentioned earlier, Val, I don't feel I want to put myself at risk. I want to go back to work. It's not that but I'm making enough now that I want this to get past a point of where I feel comfortable going back at it. And then other hotels that are pushing themselves past their service capabilities simply to try to get the demand and fall flat on their face because they're understaffed for what they're trying to provide as inventory availability. And that is crushing them on their business at this point, because people will false start in there, they get a horrible experience, and it gets massively broadcast on the huge wave of what's wrong with travel right now. So that's not helping our storyline much at all. But I would like to introduce Mr. Stuart Butler, the King of the Hill.
Hey guys, you got quoted on it just around zero. Yeah.
G'day, mate. G'day.
G'day, Cobbers. Yeah. I've been listening quietly for about 10 minutes. It's interesting. We're having this conversation. It's a conversation that a lot of people are having right now. And it's based broadly on a lot of speculation because, as was rightfully pointed out, that the data is kind of all over the place. But I'm a big fan of knowing the knowable and controlling the controllable, right? And so there's a lot going on that we can't know and we can't control right now. So I think for the hotels listening, although there's a lot of value in the speculation we're doing, I think we probably need to pull the conversation back a little bit to what are some tangible things they should be doing or should be thinking about right now. Because maybe the cases are going to go up. Maybe there's going to be a lot more hospitalization. Maybe restrictions are going to get pulled back. But to Tim's point, I think right now you've got to understand whether the guests that are coming are going to wear masks or not. You're going to get more bookings the more you're talking about the safety precautions you're taking on at your property, right? So promoting that in your marketing is really important right now, like the videos that Lauren talked about. That's really, really critical. We also know that if your staff members get COVID-19, you're pretty much screwed. So you need to be doing everything from a precautionary perspective to protect your staff, and that includes mandatory temperature checks and PPE and all the things we talked about. So I think you as an operator, regardless of your political persuasion, regardless of your guest political persuasion or their attitudes towards face masks and hand sanitizer and other stuff, you have a responsibility to your business to be doing the things you should be doing right now. I think without that, you're in danger of not only losing your share of the market, but maybe losing your business entirely. We've seen in Myrtle Beach in the last couple of weeks, one hotel in Charleston, 2 hours away from us, 2 restaurants that have had positive cases of staff members and have had to shut down for 14 days. You know, that's the worst thing that could happen to you right now. So you really gotta look at what you can control, what you could know, and focus on that stuff. But I will say the same thing I've been saying for 3, 4, 5 weeks now. People are willing to travel, and the ones that are willing to travel right now are the ones that don't care so much. They're not as fearful because the nature of the fact that they're traveling tells you that they're early adopters and less fearful. They're not wearing face masks, the majority of them. They're not taking precautions. So if you want to be in business, you got to accept that reality and deal with it. But it's crazy. We're looking at another sold-out weekend in Myrtle Beach this weekend. 4 out of the last 5 have been sold out. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh, you got quoted on HSMEI's BC chapter yesterday. Somebody else was on your presentation with TripAdvisor, and
Oh, really?
yeah, and so you should get to know Stuart, nor Melissa, really, not Stuart. Stuart's just the Melissa's the brains of the operation.
No, I would argue Melissa's more eye candy than I am, but yeah, sure. She's the brains and the look.
Kind to you.
I'm not
She's
sure what my role is.
on. It just, we're trying to be nice that you show up, so it's all good.
That's funny.
I think she's actually in the peanut gallery today. Yeah, she's there.
maybe so.
Yeah, she is. So Robert was nice enough to give us a last-minute list on some stuff. Most of it's COVID-related. I think I'm calling him Dr. Spectre because everything he pumps out is like death, destruction, pain. The stats.
News at the moment.
That's why we have no rut rows. The whole list is kind of a rut row.
The whole list is a rut row.
But I actually disagree with that. I mean, yes, the whole list is a rut row, but to Stuart's point, there's good news out there. There is demand in some markets, and I agree with.
Oh, I agree
that we need to take advantage. And I didn't mean to suggest you didn't. Really, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just thinking Robert's list is a rut row.
Right. No, totally. We
So
definitely need to
I
take
found the most
advantage of the good work. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead, Valen. I was.
Is the news about Roomkey. So, I mean, I don't know how many of you know about Roomkey. But not,
Which, by the way, is the problem.
right. Not the PMS. So that's the other problem. There's a PMS out there called Roomkey.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then there's a distribution site called Roomkey that I suppose if anything was going to take Roomkey down, it would be this current environment. Because it's been limping along for years, right? I just find that whole thing to be so interesting that it's lasted this long.
I guess the reason. So, and just to recap the story for those of you who don't know Roomkey was a joint venture, or was owned by a joint venture by a number of hotel companies: Marriott, IHG, Hilton, Hyatt, Wyndham, etc. That used a pop under to on exit. So if somebody didn't make a booking, they would see a pop under, and they would be offered other hotels in market from other competing brands, actually, so that they would keep the guest booking direct. And they have said that they're going to shut down the consumer-facing side of Roomkey. They may do other things that hasn't been decided, but Roomkey.com itself is going to go away. And it's one of the things that I have a point of view on this that may be different than others. I'm not really sure. But we've seen this again and again over the years when different companies come together in the hospitality industry to do what's good for the industry. They always bail after a certain amount of time.
Mm.
It has happened more than once over the 20 years that I've been in the industry. And it's because, to quote Ted Tang, who used to be my boss at leading hotels of the world, he always said, a great joint venture works because the parents do what's in the best interest of the child, not what's in the best interest of the parents. Right? And, I don't know that when the various hotel companies, I think their interests are different enough that they have a hard time doing what's in the best interest of the child. So this may have been inevitable, and this was just the thing that made it happen.
Right. And there's always just the idea of expertise anyway, right? So if you look at what Expedia and Booking.com spend their money on, they don't have to worry about new carpets, new mattresses, or, building taxes. They focus on user interface and user interactions and user experience and technology to keep the processing,
and a ton of advertising. A lot of advertising.
But they have
Roomkey did not.
But they have to charge for it, right?
Which technically, if Roomkey had been let to operate, and I shouldn't say had been let to operate, because I actually don't know what they've been allowed to do or not do. So I want to be very clear about that. What I do want to say is the idea of having a joint venture is that they would have been free to do that. Now they should have been free to get outside capital. They should have been free to do any number of things to legitimately compete. But if you're going to run with your one leg tied behind your back, that's only going to work so well, right? So,
and Accor released Fast Booking, 4, 5, 6 years ago, which was recently taken over. It's now, I think, Avail Pro, but combined with some other entity. I mean, that was the same, right? They wanted to create a platform not only to distribute their own inventory, but they invited other companies to put their inventory on the same platform, and they just couldn't. They just can't compete. To Stuart's point, with the advertising, but also with the user experience. It's just so hard to do.
I mean, a pop under
Roomkey is still has lasted this long.
A pop under is just.
Oh yeah, no, it's true.
Especially today when 65-70% of traffic is on mobile.
Right.
Technology is not effective.
Right.
But I would also say, and I'm not. I don't know why I'm like defending Roomkey here. Because I'm actually not. Everything you just said is right. I agree with you completely. What I think is also true is I don't buy into the narrative that you can't come in and compete against an Expedia or you can't compete against Booking.com if you commit to actually doing it, getting funding and the like. Right. So I think that's the bigger issue here is that however it was set up, whatever they did, I don't think was done for the best interest of what Roomkey could have been. It was probably done for the best interest of the parents.
Right.
Which are not necessarily the same thing, right?
Well, we're going to have an interesting trial as one falls. There is another one, albeit in a very different area, that is going to open up because France is looking to do its own OTA, isn't it? I think if there's anything that is likely to succeed, it would be the France method, only if they legislate the living daylights out and restrict all of the OTAs, which they can legitimately do.
Right.
They can turn around and say, make it almost a state-owned OTA, which has long been a suspicion that I'm wondering if they're going down that route, just not yet announcing it. Because if they do, then they will succeed.
Right, but that's nothing that would ever translate to the U.S. There would be too many people up in arms about,
Right, that's a specific.
Well, so hang on a second. A hotelier as president creating a state-owned. OTA. I can't see what the problem there would be. I really can't.
That's funny.
I gotta say,
the reality is they didn't commit to the concept enough. If they were really serious about it, they should have looked long term and said, okay, if we want to eliminate the OTAs completely, we don't feel like they're necessary. They could have unilaterally said, we're going to take our entire budget that we spend on OTAs, pull out of OTAs, and put all of that into advertising.
Correct.
If they had done that back then, today they would be in a lot better situation than they are.
Yeah.
They're never going to take that kind of bold move because there's too many opinions and they're interested in the parent, not the child, as Tim said.
Yeah, I mean their best interest is somewhere else.
Right.
I mean, if I want to say this, I worked for Wyndham for a long time. We had 7,000 franchisees. If we had announced publicly that we were going to take 100% of our budget that we spend on Expedia, or excuse me, all of the revenue that was delivered by Expedia and Booking and things along those lines. Mm-hmm. Dean can bite his cheek or tongue at the moment because he might have a different point of view on it. But if we'd said that, we would have lost 1,000 franchisees the day we announced it.
Right. Well, remember when IHG pulled all of its inventory out of Expedia? I mean, that was a long time ago.
That was 2003.
The franchisees were up in arms, and
And a year later, they signed a worse deal, and the person who engineered that was formally invited to take his talents elsewhere. and I fully want to say he was right. I actually agree with what he was trying to do. So I'm not like, I don't think he was wrong. It's just they're in the business of selling franchises, and you tell your franchisees that you're going to lose 15 to 20% of your revenue off the top line. There are not a lot of people who are going to say, no, that's completely fine. You should totally do that.
The person who made that decision came from an airline.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so, because I was working for him when I was at PwC at that time.
Right.
So that it was super interesting to have a front seat to that.
Yeah.
But holy cow, the franchisees, because they had no inkling that this was going to happen. So all of a sudden they saw a tremendous source of business just being yanked right out from underneath.
But no one's approaching it from a long-term perspective, right? Because you could tell a story about how you're going to reinvest that money to drive better ROI for the franchise holders. It may take a 6-month dip, but if you're looking at 12 months having a 2x the return on the direct bookings, then it makes sense. I just think people look at it from we're just going to turn on this faucet and it's going to work versus a long-term, how do we become self-sustainable and not relying on a third party.
The challenge with IHG is that they probably didn't tell a good story to the franchisees.
Correct. That's exactly right.
They didn't provide the context that these business owners needed to have confidence in that decision.
Correct. That was the mistake. It was a strategic error in the implementation of the strategy. It wasn't. The strategy was right. I just think it was implemented poorly. And wasn't
you worked with the guy. I worked at one of their larger competitors. I can tell you the number, and I agree with everything you just said. The number of franchisees, IHG franchisees, who suddenly started returning our sales guys' calls went up a ton. And candidly, we were happy to take them.
We have a unique mix between revenue management and marketing and technology on our.
By the way, I apologize. I do have to drop because
me too.
You're not the technology dude anyway, so there.
Exactly right.
So I'll jump to my question in a second. But Mr. Tim, if people want to know more about you and what it is you do, where is it they can find you, sir?
They can find me at timpeter.com.
And Valen, where is it they can find you, and what is it you do and all that fun stuff?
So information about Nor1 at nor1.com, and I am Valen.Perini just about everywhere.
Outstanding.
Lauren, can I jump in as well? I've got a call in 3 minutes that I'm going to have to go.
I need to keep Ben because I have a technical question that will save the universe as we know it today. And
you always
hear the answer.
Yeah, you always have really great questions just as I'm leaving. You did that last week as well.
And you're seeing a pattern here, Tristan.
I know. It's me. Okay. So you can get me at tris.hayward@3and6.agency or get me on LinkedIn. I have a very unique spelling of my surname. I'm the only one that you'll be able to find on there. So there you go.
Thank you, Tris. I appreciate the time as always. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Same as you. All right, Ben. And since we have Mr. On top of the pile, Stewart, Save the World, too many people want his business. He's going to have a whole subcategory of people just taking care of his notes later on. So, and Lily and okay. So, is there a new way that's going to come out of this to sell hotel rooms technology-wise? I mean, Dean, an equal part of this conversation to tell as well, but just we've gone into this with the traditional. Okay, we're going to have little WYSIWYG drop-ins for direct channel feed incrementalities. We're going to have these new things of driving people to alternate ways of booking and so forth. Do you see something different coming out of this that says we haven't done this? It's a blend between revenue strategy, marketing know-how, and technology. Do you see something different?
How long have you worked in this industry, Lauren?
Obviously not long enough.
That's the same reaction I had, Stuart.
I think you've probably seen everything, Lauren. I really do think you've probably seen everything new. Do I think there's going to be something new coming out of it? I know there's a few companies working on some interesting technologies.
He says,
I know there's a few companies working on some interesting technologies to bring to the market. A big believer in innovation coming out of crisis. This is a time where nobody in the industry is particularly comfortable. And this is the time where new ideas and new partnerships and new ways of looking at existing problems some people didn't even realize they had come about. So yeah, I do think there is. I do think there's going to be new things that come out of here, and they may be on the back of technologies that have arrived in the same way. I'm really interested, and I've got one eye firmly on Google's Paper Stay. I know it's not a new technology, but I think the way people are going to react to it, there's going to need to be management of this, and there's going to need to be education of hoteliers on these new technologies that are popping out. Paper Stay, as an example, it might have the Google branding on it. It might be very shiny. It might have lovely emails with little cartoony pictures on it. They're still charging you a commission for the stay. They're an OTA without the service. They're not going to care. Google are going to go, hey, you bought from us, but you're staying at the Hotel Hanley. And we're going to have to educate hotels on not just suckling at the Google teat for everything, for literally everything, because you're just replacing Booking with Google. And I guarantee these are going to care less about you than these did, because for Booking, you are their pie. For Google, you are a small piece of their pie, and they're just interested in domination. So they're going to do everything they can for you to increase your reliance on their technologies. And once they've got you, once you're the only place to go for that, you'll see the percentages go up, more people win the auctions, and it'll be the same problem, just moved to a different place.
You know, I choose to answer a slightly different question than the one that was asked. Should things change?
That's a lot easier, Lily. That's a lot easier.
I don't like your question, Lauren. Let me ask my own.
Should things change? Yes, absolutely. Because I think, this comes back to a point I've made several times over the last couple of months. Till now, we've been doing a lot of price marketing. We market 20% off. We don't market why you should want that 20% off. Why should you stay at this hotel? And I think that most booking engines are designed around, here's a room on a shelf, pick one, instead of really creating that inspirational experience through the booking engine itself. And I think, if I go into one more booking engine where every room has the same photo attached to it, but there's a $500 price difference between the rooms, and all you tell me is that it includes an iron and a hair dryer, that's not helpful. So what my hope is that people will take a closer look at the booking experience. We can only control direct booking mostly. The rest is up to these other technology partners and OTAs, but why not make your site the most inspirational? Why not make it easier for the guest to be inspired by an upgraded room type and not look at, here's a bunch of prices on a shelf with outdated photography, pick one.
I think that cues up Adele quite well.
Yes. Well, in different situations, you're looking for different things. And I think we've spent a lot of time dealing with how to maximize our revenue by making sure that our website is getting the most business and our direct is getting the most business, and weaning ourselves off of OTAs. Of course, it's really gone in the other direction for just about anybody I know, even those who are working very diligently on it, because they're advertising like crazy. And they can out advertise any hotelier. But right now, when there's not going to be compression like we've known it for a long time, except in Myrtle Beach. What are you doing over there? But where we're needing compression, we're going to have to make sure all the faucets are open. But of course, the first place is going to be, your direct business. And the best way I have always found of getting business is make sure every single person leaves your hotel saying that they had a unique experience that they cannot get at any other hotel. You are not a commodity. You are the the entire journey experience before you got to the hotel, what happened to you at the hotel, how you felt after the hotel, and the connection, the personal human to human connection you have with the people who are at a property. And everything that you do should be a reflection of that. Everything you do should be making sure that every single person leaves as a brand ambassador of your hotel. And I think that it's crazy how many hotels have settled for average. And the average score of somebody on TripAdvisor, for example, is 4.1. And everybody is just happy to be at 4.1. And they're saying, yeah, we're doing good. 4.1 out of 5, 4.1. That's good. My boss, Henry Callan, the owner of the Library Hotel Collection, says that good enough is whatever it is the killer of great. I mean, you should want to be great. You should aim for the stars. You should try to be the best hotel, whatever hotel you are, even if it's a truck stop on Route 109. It should be the best you can be, and that is what. When people say get back to basics, they should be get back to basics about your hotel experience. And I'm not gonna make enemies of any OTA right now. Anybody that can bring me anything, Google, TripAdvisor, OTAs, travel agents, I'm gonna be everybody's best friend right now. But it's the guest experience that's the foundation of everything.
Mhm.
Which is why your properties are always at the top of the TripAdvisor rankings in the destination.
Yeah.
Because where focus goes, energy flows. Right? It's something you focus on, and there's an outcome. But you touched on something, which is really the answer to Lauren's question. So if you ask the question, are we going to see revolutionary change in the industry because of this? Absolutely not. People will go back to the same let it go attitude that they've always had. They will settle for mediocre booking engines and mediocre websites that don't work on mobile, because candidly, right now, they're probably busy. They're probably doing things that they're not trained fully to do because they've reduced staff. They're probably going to be overwhelmed for the next 12, 24 months because business isn't going to come back and they're not going to get back to full staff. So the crappy booking engines that are out there, the crappy websites that are out there, the crappy PMSs that are out there that we've settled with for the last X number of years, we're going to continue to settle with as an industry, right? Now, the good news is if you don't want to settle, now is a massive opportunity to take market share, to increase your profitability, to attract the best talent, because we have a catalyst right now that has fundamentally changed how consumers behave. They're willing to learn new things. They're willing to do new things, and you can leverage that. You should be investing in a world-class booking experience that is on par with the OTAs right now. And to Dean's quote, which I've used probably a gazillion times in the last 2 months, the whole world has been on this pit stop, and if you haven't been changing out your tires and regassing, you're going to be in trouble. You still have a little window left. You still have time to go and evaluate new software. And a lot of vendors are willing to give it away right now. They're willing to waive fees. They're willing to give massive discounts. Now is the best chance you ever had, if you have the staff, to go and get a world-class CRM product that isn't just spray and pray emails out to your database, but is doing real one-to-one cross-channel marketing through SMS, push notifications, email, is using artificial intelligence to segment people into groups where you can actually make recommendations and drive incremental revenue. So you've got to put the effort in, but is it going to happen en masse in the industry? Absolutely not. But will a handful of properties that are forward-thinking capitalize on it? Absolutely, they will. So,
and further to your point about things not changing, if we look at the major declines in our economy and world events over the past couple of decades, 9/11, for example, as 9/11 happened, that really gave rise to some of the opaque OTA channels, right? Your Hotwire and Priceline, the sudden they came in, and as hoteliers, we were ready to sell our souls to the OTAs to put heads in beds. We're like, yes, please sell my room.
Starving, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
But then what happened after that? Well, that goes on for a couple of years and things start to recover. And then we spend the next decade trying to get that back again. And we're going to go through that same cycle over again. We want anybody who will sell a room to sell a room. And then we're going to be all trying to figure out how we get that back. Now, one thing that's different now than it was back in 2001, it is where Google falls into this equation with some of the meta search things that they're able to do. I mean, everybody knows I'm a big fan of the direct booking and a lot of reasons for that, not go down that rabbit hole. But Google is making it easier and easier for a hotel to capture that direct booking and compete with the OTAs. And there's ways they can do that. And especially as we think about whether it's a post-COVID or it's a between COVID, by between, I mean, the resurgence as we're seeing right now. I want that direct booking because I need to control that narrative. And if there's a need to cancel and rebook and do things like that, boy, I better be the one doing that rather than allowing an OTA to do that. I don't want Expedia rebooking my guests. That should be me. And to Adele's point too, if I'm going to embrace my guests, I've got to have them coming in direct. I just can't do that through an OTA.
But I would also argue, though, that you're trading Darth Vader for Darth Sidious, by replacing an OTA with Google, right? There's someone a lot more evil than the OTAs, and that is Google, because they have way more control over the consumer than the OTAs does, right? So I think you've got to be careful, not just replacing, but having a strategy of, well, how do I leverage and diversify using Google while also trying to drive more direct bookings through my own channels? Can I capture more guest data? Can I do a better job with my CRM to drive people back? Can I do a better job with my guest loyalty? Can I install a mobile app so someone comes back and books directly through me and doesn't touch anyone else in the ecosystem? Those are the things that people should really be investing in my opinion.
Yeah. Growing your database is so central. Right?
Yeah.
That's the best way to get business.
That part is the brands. And it's a bit of a soapbox right now. I have brand clients right now, and it is one of the first things I was going to do is step into their platforms and go over and start optimizing and reconfiguring the content associated with the brand hotels, because different circumstance, different priorities, different interests, and so forth. And every brand, and we mean about anyone in particular, I go to log in after I got my credentials. Big red sign, due to COVID-19, we do not have internal staff capable of creating updates or updating your content and or e-commerce functions at this particular time. You can create your submissions, but they will not be addressed at this current time. So the brand hotels are literally, for even the ones that have the initiative to go off and say, I got to do some changes, can't. And they can't even impact their own advertising. They can't impact their own websites. They can't do anything. They got to sit there and wait for somebody to get rehired behind a desk that doesn't exist right now to do something. And it's terrible. I mean, right now, for anybody, independent or not, you can walk into the daisy field and pick any piece of business you want from any brand because they're stuck in the mud. They can't walk. And then for brand hotels, jump on social. Right now, it's your only place to jump right now. Get in there and start. We're doing things, and this is no exaggeration, where we're taking a current package that isn't accurate as to what we're offering and saying, once you book it, call us so we can change it for you. No lie, because I can't change the package. I mean, I'm actually making the guests have to do an extra step just because we can't even change the own package to do it. It's insane, So from when you're talking about, Stuart, about opportunities now for market share, this is the time for market share.
Especially for independent hotels. Holy cow. Yeah. Independent hotels are way more agile than flags. If you're not running around the Hilton next door, then you're doing something very wrong.
Yeah.
I don't want to share your money with somebody else anyway. Sorry.
And I will be curious to see if this does lead to when we start seeing a trend of some deflagging of hotels. Will there be a rise in independence? Even the soft brands. Soft brands are still tied to the brand, right? That they're still bound by the rules and regulations to one degree or another, what the brand is doing and the capabilities or lack thereof of what that brand is doing versus somebody who's truly doing it for themselves.
Well, unfortunately, the one thing that makes us beholden to flags is probably truer now than it was before, and that is financing. It's almost impossible to go to a bank and say, I want to create or build or reno an independent hotel. Without the stability of the flag behind it, banks do not want to lend. So until someone comes out and is willing to pony up the capital to invest in independent, I think we're going to see people still stay flying the flags, unfortunately.
So if there was only a booking engine that had a mobile component with a wireless key system or something like that was out in the market, they would be doing some great business here about now. Know anything like that, Stuart?
Yeah, I do. I don't want to promote it right now. I mean, we got so much demand for our product. It sounds really arrogant, but it's like I need to pull back a little bit on our advertising, because I literally was late because I was working with a new install, and I got another client meeting in a second. So it's good. But yeah, independent hotels have a massive advantage. There's not just us. There's a lot of great technology out there. Ben's ex-company has some great technology. Dean's company has some great technology. There's a lot of partners out there that you can work with in the space. In what I'm seeing, one of the good things I'm seeing in the industry that's come out of COVID is a more collaborative, open mindset from the vendors. And you can tell the vendors that you should be working with because they're all working together. They're not, fighting against each other and trying to steal the same business. They're being collaborative. You're seeing folks like, Milestone and Fuel working together, which it would never have happened pre-COVID. And we're referring business to each other. We do pretty much similar things in a lot of ways. We just do it a little differently. But so I think the vendor space has benefited a lot, and that will benefit the hospitality industry overall.
Addressing some of the earlier comments from Richard, if he's still with us, is that Adele, more so than ever, the need for consumer sentiment response, consumer sentiment dialogue, consumer sentiment sensitivity. If you haven't been doing it up to now, doing it more so than you've ever done before. And to your point, the cultural development at the hotel that you do, of creating that culture of that experience and so forth, because the team members are coming back and they have their concerns as to their safety, as to the guest safety, as to how are they going to operate and give that level of service that they were doing before. With a mask on, they can't smile as much anymore. With that inability to touch, you can't shake and engage that 5-10 rule. It's now like 20-50 rule, that kind of thing. So, how do you readapt your methods of that, giving of that guest experience culturally within the hotel? More so than ever, what you do is already a critical component to that, I'm sure. So,
yeah,
I had a really interesting conversation about that last week with one of our podcast listeners, and she was saying, she's in one of those situations where all the staff's gone, and she's on the marketing team and operations team, but she's also manning the front desk right now. And she's gone from not, 3, 4, 5 months ago, every guest that came in was just another guest and just another guest, and they were going through the routine. But what she's noticed in herself is that spirit of hospitality has come back, because and more so than ever, because now every guest that walks by is really appreciated the way every guest should be appreciated. So I think, regardless of everything we talked about, whether you have money to invest or not, what Adele mentioned before should be at the cornerstone of everything you do moving forward. Putting hospitality back into the hotel business, being a true innkeeper and treating every guest as an individual and making sure they have an amazing experience that exceeded their expectations. If you do that part right, the rest of it will come and will fall into place. If you do that part wrong or not well, regardless of anything else you do, you will fail. Hospitality has to be at the center of everything you do.
This would be a good
Adele's great at
time.
that.
This would be a good time to speak to your staff when they're coming in, and every single day at the morning stand-up or rally or huddle or whatever you call it, and really dig down into their hearts to say, this is a calling, this is our sacred vow to do everything we can. It's our job to do everything that we can to make this travel experience, not just inside the hotel, but from start to finish, as comfortable as possible for them. And we are here for them, and we're their ambassador to comfort and security and happiness in every way. And when nobody is looking, the things that you do to clean that room and the things that you do to prepare things to be just a little bit more welcoming and more wonderful for them, you're going to see your reviews fly and your referrals fly.
Yeah. Well, Lily, also to your point too, where we were struggling before this to show this convergence conversation between marketing, revenue management, and sales, I think the point's moot now.
It's basically happening organically. It turns out that all we really had to do was follow Nike's advice
Yeah.
Just do it.
Do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden people are just doing it and they're almost falling into convergence without even realizing it because it's just impossible to have a good strategy at this stage without it. And so I think that's a definite silver lining.
Mm.
Speaking to that, just keeping in mind, if there's anything you can do right now to break down those silos between departments and break down those knowledge silos, everybody should understand what you're doing and why.
Mm.
And they can all contribute to that common goal.
I'm sure but for those who survived through this by staying employed for the hotels that were going through this process, I think the meetings in the rooms, should they have actually been in the same room at the same time, even distance, I think a lot of the politics and sandboxing and private agendas got left at the door because I think everybody walked in there feeling like, okay, I don't want to swim. I want to keep the boat afloat. What can we do to fix it?
Yep, absolutely. In times of crisis, people come together. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, when the crisis continues for too long, sometimes people start to go at each other's throats a little bit, but really take advantage of the coming together that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I know we're getting close on time. Can I throw in one article real quick that I wanted to just make a quick point on?
Sure.
So there was an article in the list about Las Vegas dropping rates, and it was kind of listed as, I guess I'm on a bad data kick today. It was kind of listed as an indicator that we should be worried about. But I actually just got off of an interview this morning with the VP of revenue for a major casino organization, which I can't name because I don't have permission. But they were saying that, demand is pretty high right now, but the basic tenets of their revenue management are still the same in that rooms are an amenity, not the main point. And so I don't want regular hotels to look at casinos dropping their room rates as an indicator that the whole world should start doing that. You still want to focus on your own market and your own similar types of hotels, because really casinos just want to get you in the door so that you'll spend your money on gambling. And they did also say that consumer spend has been significantly up on site compared to usual. So I just wanted to kind of point that out from the article. I think it's definitely an interesting data point to understand, because for sure they're trying to steal demand from other markets and other types of accommodations, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the idea that standard hotels should follow suit.
I'll add to that a little bit too, and I'm sorry, how I'm great at with names, but the guy that runs the revenue management for MGM, really brilliant guy. And he was speaking one time about Las Vegas, and he was talking about, he asked the room, he says, so what do you think is the biggest money maker for us in Las Vegas? And people are like, oh, gambling. He's like, nope. He says, there's other shows. Nope. It's the pool parties, the disco, the DJ pool parties. Those things were $1,500 to have a little table off to the side or whatever. Well, those are gone right now. So Las Vegas has had to retool back to their old school mentality of get them in front of the gaming. You can't do these group things anymore. You can't do this, but everybody's in the pool together kind of stuff. You can, but not at the scale that they were doing it, at the profitability they were doing it, same two shows and everything else. So they're going back to a more traditional model of give the room away, get in the casino. So that's where, to your point, that's where they're dropping these rates, is like, hey, I want you to have more money in your pocket to walk around and put it into the machines, than to worry about having to pay for a hotel room and stuff. So yeah, good point about that.
Look at Vegas year over year too. If you have gone back to June, July of 2019, and look at room rates in Vegas, where it's 110 degrees in the summer, look, a $25 room, even an $18 per night room rate at a major casino in Vegas, that's not unusual. That's not a post-COVID. That's just Vegas in the summer, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little sensationalized.
Yeah, very true.
Go ahead.
Pre-COVID, our New York City properties of the Library Hotel Collection would have, $200 or $199. That is the floor. But it could go up, into the 500s or even 600s in the peak season. Now, I'm staying within my range, but if the UN General Assembly and Fashion Week isn't happening in the middle of September, I can't say that it's on my peak. I could have it as low season for the first time in ever. I'm not going to go below that, but I can't I can't. There's no opera. If there's no symphony, if there's no
Broadway.
museums, Broadway, especially Broadway, no concerts,
Yeah.
no bookstore.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I think that the thing that folks really need to realize is that their playbook, the rules that they operated under, no longer apply. So if you look at your strategy throughout the year, great example, Adele. If you're in New York, the events that happened are not there. They're not creating the compression that was the reason why demand happened. So you've got to understand that. So what is the compression now, or what is creating the demand, and how do I go looking for those people? On the other side, you've got to realize that price is a lever that you can still pull, but it's not one that's effective in the same way it used to be. And it's not the most effective lever you can pull anymore. It used to be, but now things like safety are a bigger priority to people than prices. So I think although the natural reaction is always, well, I need more heads in beds, I'm going to drop the rate and it will automatically magically happen. It might, but probably not to the degree that it used to. So although it's still a piece of the strategy, you got to look at the other pieces in totality, because otherwise you're in what Tim always refers to as a race to the bottom. You're in this rate war with the hotels next to you or in your market, and you're all going to be not just, half empty, but half empty and losing money on the folks that you are getting. So you've got to be disciplined, and it's really hard when demand is low. But demand will come back. And you've got to look at this long term. If I set my hotel rate at $50 right now, and my floor used to be $200, I'm going to get a whole different group of people than I'm used to getting that are not going to come back. And maybe will affect my reviews, which is going to affect whether the people I used to get are going to come back. So you've really got to play the long game. And I get that people are in survival mode and you've got to do what you've got to do, but you've got to do it in a way that's smart and looking at the long-term impact of the decisions you make. You'd be better off right now putting more information about how you're keeping guests safe on your website and in your email communication than you are saying there's a 20% or a 30% or a 40% discount. Right. That's going to move the needle more right now than rate.
It's funny that you bring that up in the chat that said that you got quoted on. Amadeus was on there, Anthony Wu, great guy, and he's been sharing some neat data that Amadeus has been putting together with Travel Click back following airline lift and hotel lift and so forth, but strictly in Canada. And they were talking about the fact that short-term transient pickup, short booking window transient travel, short distance travel is the key element to this. And I made a cautionary statement of saying that's fine, but that's one fish in the pond. All of us can't eat the same fish. Okay, so if we all try to target that, we're all going to lose. There's a lot of fractional businesses out there that are way different landscape than we were beforehand. So if you're coming back to the reopening game and saying, okay, let's do what's transient, what's group, what's this, and you're looking at it from the old lens of what you used to do, you are missing everything. Because the business that's out there now, as you pointed out before with Myrtle Beach and so forth, the type of traveler now is a real function. Persona travel is a methodology that has to be used. Demographic segmentation has to be used. You can't just say, feeder market X, let's dump some ads in that market and get people out there. You're not talking to anybody. You're talking broadcast. Like, hey, we're here. You need to be talking to a demographic, to a geography with a message. And it has to be particular to the interest or potential interest that they have for it. Thank you.
And it goes beyond that because, previously we were in a fortunate situation. And as hard as people may have thought 2019 was to generate business, the reality was almost all hotels were in the game of harvesting intent to travel. Very few hotels, there are exceptions, but very few hotels were actually generating the demand for travel. They were just spending money get in front of people that are already interested in traveling. The reality is now there's a lot fewer of those. So you can't just throw out a net and expect to catch a lot of people. You've got to go and create that demand. You've got to stoke the fire and go and hit your database in a more creative way. You've got to create reasons for people. We've all got to become a little bit of a destination marketing organization because, even though our CBBs and our chambers are doing that, you're going to have to be a little bit responsible for that to create some of that demand that you didn't used to have to do. This is a new part of marketing that a lot of, especially newer folks in the industry, have never had to do before. So it's a completely different world out there. You've got to be a lot more aggressive because, like Ed said on the show several times, we're not gatherers anymore. We're hunters. everyone is a hunter. Everyone is a predator right now. We're all looking for the same prey, and we're all going to be fighting tooth and nail for the same prey. And if you're late to the game, you're going to be walking up on a dead carcass that's already been stripped. And you don't want to be that person. So you go create your own prey. You go find your own people, and then you're going to be a lot more successful. And I'm not condoning that we eat our guests. That's not what I'm saying. But we should generate new guests.
Well, we are at the 2-hour mark. And thank you. I mean, it's always fun how fast 2 hours can go when you're having fun in the conversation. And I sincerely appreciate the fact that we're able to do that. Thank you again for our previous co-host, Dr. Gustin, right? Gustin, that's
You're the
right.
worst with names.
I know you got it right at the beginning of the
I can't keep people's names straight. It's yeah, but anyway, fortunately, I have you all to keep me corrected. So okay. But and everyone else that has this co-host, and for everyone else on the channels, my apologies for everyone on LinkedIn. I got to go find out what's going on with LinkedIn. It goes up, but it's not broadcasting. So I got to figure out what they changed in their protocol, because nothing's changed on our side. So the streaming feed, they've either changed their frame rate or something. I got to go dig and see what the tech is.
Use error.
Okay, I'll take that. Sure. Hey, wouldn't be the first time. So with that in mind, Adele, if people want to know more about you and where they can find you, where would that be?
LinkedIn with me. I'm Adele Gutman Milne on LinkedIn.
And Mr. Ben, since your smarter, better looking half left already, and you're kind of left holding the bag on telling all them stories.
To be fair, I've been carrying him for a decade, so why should today be different? Yeah, you can catch me at Ben.Hanley3 Agency. Next week, I guarantee I'm going to have a placard to hold up, because I keep saying it's a great idea. I'm going to do it next. I'm going to have a little sign here, maybe even get my wife's laminator if I feel adventurous.
I check your website every day to see if it's up. Just I'm one of those hard and faithful. I'm waiting.
We are working on some particularly exciting launch content. It is going to be our special brand of communication.
I love the evil smirky thing behind this.
You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it.
We're going to love to hate it. We're going to love to hate it.
Maybe it's going to be like nothing else you've ever seen on the internet.
Excellent.
Wow.
And Mr.
You're going to be the Marmite of agencies.
Absolutely, mate.
Yeah.
Mr. Dean Schmidt, if you want to know and find you, where is it that they can find you, sir?
Absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look for Dean Schmidt. Last name Schmidt is SCHMIT, 1 T, no D, and you'll find me easy.
Never said that before, have you? Miss Lily Mockerman, where is it they can find you and all of the crazy stuff that you do?
You can find us at tcrmservices.com for excellence in day-to-day revenue management, or thinkupenterprises.com for all things consulting, strategic assessments, system audits, technology selection. To Stuart's point, you might want to pick an expert to help you select your technology, because I found it's very costly if you don't. And our podcast, hosted on thinkupenterprises.com, which I'll drop the long link there. Nope. Yeah, that's the right one. And our most recent episode that's up right now actually features Mr. Stuart Butler.
He is the man. He is
Right?
the man.
And
He
I think
is
we're gonna
everywhere.
a new one coming up shortly here with Anisha Yadav of Revenate talking about marketing in the midst of COVID.
And the pinnacle of success, the man of the hour, the top of the gold pile, the standard of all things to be done correctly. Mr. Stuart Butler, where is it they can find you, sir?
Well, first I want to say that it is absolutely not. None of the success we've been seeing is due to me. It's despite me, and it's all because of the fueligans that I have, like folks like Melissa and Pete that work hard every day. But you can find us at fueltravel.com. That is the mothership where you can learn about our awesome booking engine, our mobile app, and our CRM software, or our services. You can listen to us if you're not tired of listening to me today. You can listen to us at fueltravel.com/podcast. We have 153 episodes published of great content that you might enjoy.
Fairly excellent content, sincerely. Both podcasts. Lily's is excellent as well, even though she had you on the show, which I don't know why she wanted to downgrade.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Took a tip.
Yeah, but you have some excellent content for all of that. Do you have a shared link that you did with TripAdvisor? Is that shareable or anything like that? Can you throw that? I can throw it in the show notes because seriously, BC chapter referred to when they watched it. Was that a closed circuit thing that you can't share?
What I don't know even sure what you're talking about.
You had something you did with TripAdvisor. Didn't you do a presentation with TripAdvisor? You're doing too many of them, dude. You're doing too many of them. Never mind. I'll ask you later.
I don't remember that. I mean, we have shared TripAdvisor data. I don't know that we did a presentation with. I am doing one with Expedia next week. Even though I trust OTAs.
I think Ed did the BC chapter.
Did he? Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking. Who knows? All right,
Probably
me and my
so.
link mind here.
He steals that data all the time. It's okay.
Yeah, I was about to say it's Stuart's data. Ed just put scratch his little name out, put his name on top of it.
No, he gives us full credit. He does it the right way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyway, so for the replay of this show, along with show notes and links of a lot of stuff we didn't get to from Mr. Robert Cole's list that he does generously give us each week, and if you would like to subscribe to it for free, you can go to bit.ly/rockcheetah, all lowercase. There you can sign up and get his newsletter that is close to being launched just about 15 minutes before the show. Mr. Ben?
Sorry, Stuart, will we be having next week the results from the next sentiment study, or am I...
No, we're actually going to every 3 weeks at this point, just to avoid some fatigue and because the changes have slowed down from what we can tell. So we're going to every 3 weeks. So we were scheduled to survey yesterday. We're actually going to do it next Thursday. So the following week we'll have data to analyze on that.
Good. I only mentioned it because obviously I promote it at any opportunity I can. I think a lot of people find it useful, even across the pond this side.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are sharing it, obviously around the country, to the point where somebody asked me, "You do a lot of work with fuel travel. Do you work for them now?" I was like, "No, one Brit is enough as a fuel."
I think I've shared the link to that traveler sentiment survey after almost every touch point call that I've had with people. So if I could make revenue that way somehow, I could hire 5 more people.
Yeah, I mean, I told my wife about it, but you'd be surprised how little she cared. So we should read this study, isn't it?
And I'll put it into the show links too, because it is, we had Melissa, which is of course the more intelligent conversation when it comes from it last week. And she went through all the details, every detail. Matter of fact, we made sure exhaustively, Ben made sure exhaustively, there was no detail left for Melissa. Melissa was done. She finished everything she wanted to say, given the fact that the time before that, we didn't give her much of the time to do it. So, but that link I'll put in there as well for the show notes. We of course have all previous 152 episodes, including the one from today, at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you can do a replay of that and the links of all the stuff that we discussed today as well. So until next Friday. Oh, we're having another guest host next week. I'm going to be scheduling today. Justin from Hotel Report is going to be our guest host next week. So it should become fun conversation for it. Yeah, we'll see. And then I think, Ben, you have a whole roster, covey of people that you're just load them up, dude. Put them in the schedule.
Yep. There's some interesting people who are going to bring some stuff. Definitely.
So as long as they're not friends with Tris, we're okay, because we want to keep.
In that case, I've got nobody. It's basically Tris in a series of different disguises to make it look like I have friends.
I was going to cover that beard up to be that girl, but I don't know. Anyway,
his problem, not mine. But yeah, some interesting people in the industry that I think we're going to be able to get on, and hopefully with more American accents.
Awesome. All right. To that end, thank you everyone for your time. As always, everyone else watching as well. And we'll see you all next Friday, 11:30 Eastern, for show number 254. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. See you guys.